She had dreamed of this night since she was a little girl. The fairy lights, the whispered promises, the ring gleaming under the glow of the city, and of course, the man she thought was her soulmate. To anyone looking in from the outside, it seemed like the perfect love story. Samantha Reyes and David Carter, two young people in love, celebrating their engagement in the heart of Austin, Texas. Friends clapped, strangers cheered, and phones captured the romantic proposal as David knelt before her, asking the question every girl longs to hear. She said yes, but hours later she would be dead. This is the chilling story of how a dream turned into a nightmare, how love morphed into possession, and how one woman underestimated her entire life, left behind the most powerful piece of evidence to ensure her voice was never silenced. Samantha Reyes was not born into privilege. Raised in a small two-bedroom apartment on the east side of Austin, her life was anything but easy. Her father had walked out when she was just 3 years old, leaving her mother, Maria, to raise Samantha and her younger brother alone. From the very start, Samantha was the quiet one. She wasn't the loudest child in the classroom or the most popular among her peers. But she had something far more powerful: grit. When her classmates struggled with homework, Samantha stayed up until midnight, poring over textbooks. When others gave up, she pushed through. She wasn't handed opportunities. She carved them out herself. By her early 20s, Samantha had become a teacher's aide at an elementary school. She adored children. Her colleagues often said that her classroom was more than a place of learning. It was a sanctuary. Kids who were bullied, kids who struggled with their lessons, all seemed to gravitate toward her. She had a gift for making them feel safe. But outside of school, Samantha carried herself differently. She was reserved, cautious, careful with her trust. Some mistook this for weakness, but those who really knew her understood she had endured much and learned to survive by being careful. And then came David. David Carter was everything Samantha wasn't. Charismatic, loud, the kind of man who walked into a room and drew every pair of eyes to him. He ran a small chain of gyms across Austin and, to most people, embodied success. He drove the flashy cars, wore the sharp suits, and never missed a chance to show off. To Samantha, who had spent her whole life being underestimated, David seemed dazzling. For the first time, here was someone who looked at her like she was the center of the world. At least, that's how it seemed. From the beginning, friends of Samantha noticed red flags. David was controlling in ways that didn't seem alarming at first. He'd comment on her outfits, suggesting she were something more flattering. He'd insist on knowing where she was at all times, brushing it off as just being protective. And Samantha, craving stability, craving the security she never had growing up, brushed these things aside. She told herself it was love. That was David's greatest weapon, convincing her that his control was a form of devotion. On August 14, 2022, David orchestrated what seemed like the perfect proposal. The rooftop restaurant was lit with candles, the skyline of Austin glittering behind them. Friends, family, and even a few strangers watched as David, in a tailored suit, dropped to one knee. The video of that moment would later go viral. Samantha's hands flew to her face in shock, tears streaming down her cheeks. David slid the diamond ring onto her finger, and the crowd erupted into cheers. It was the kind of proposal people dream about, the kind of storybook moment that gets replayed endlessly on social media. But behind David's charming smile, behind the applause and the champagne, something sinister was already in motion. Because just hours later, the same man who promised Samantha forever would steal everything from her. After the proposal, Samantha mingled with her friends, glowing with happiness. But those close to her noticed something strange. David wasn't celebrating like everyone else. He seemed restless, irritable. He pulled Samantha aside several times, whispering sharply in her ear. At one point, a bridesmaid recalled, David grabbed her arm just a little too tightly. It didn't look like a fight, the bridesmaid later said. It looked like he was scolding her, like she had done something wrong. By the time the evening wound down, Samantha's friends begged her to stay with them for the night. Something about David's mood felt wrong, but David insisted they leave together. And Samantha, still wearing her sparkling ring, still holding on to the dream of her new engagement, agreed. It was the last time her friends saw her alive. At 3:27 a.m., neighbors in David's upscale apartment complex reported hearing raised voices. One neighbor later told police, "I heard shouting, a man's voice angry, then a crash, like something heavy hitting the floor. A few minutes later, a scream, a woman's scream, and then silence." By 4:15 a.m., everything was quiet again. When morning came, Samantha was gone. Her body was discovered in the master bedroom. She had been beaten, strangled. The same hands that had slipped a ring onto her finger hours earlier had taken her life. And David? He was nowhere to be found. The Austin Police Department launched a massive search. David's SUV was missing, along with his phone and wallet. It didn't take long for investigators to uncover what really happened. Security cameras from the apartment complex showed David leaving at 4:30 a.m., carrying a duffel bag. Hours later, his vehicle was found abandoned on a rural road outside the city. Inside, detectives discovered blood-stained clothing, Samantha's smashed phone, and the engagement ring box. But the most chilling piece of evidence was found on David's laptop. Just days before the proposal, he had searched how to kill someone without leaving evidence. Life insurance payout after marriage. How long until police trace a missing person? David hadn't just snapped. He had planned this. The morning after what should have been her happiest evening, Samantha Reyes' apartment complex was swarming with police cars, flashing red and blue across the quiet Austin street. Neighbors stood outside in their robes, whispering. Inside, crime scene investigators moved methodically through David Carter's luxury apartment. The scene was grim, furniture overturned, a shattered vase, blood on the carpet, and in the bedroom, Samantha's lifeless body still wearing the engagement ring David had placed on her finger just hours earlier. The fairy tale was over. The nightmare had begun. Detectives immediately put out an APB for David. His SUV had been spotted on traffic cameras leaving the city around dawn. By 10 a.m., the vehicle was found abandoned on a rural back road, just 10 miles outside Austin. Inside were damning clues, a duffel bag with blood-stained clothes, Samantha's smashed phone, the engagement ring box, but David himself had vanished. It seemed impossible. A man so public, so flashy, so addicted to attention, now completely gone. The media exploded with coverage. "Killer fiancé on the run," headlines read. News anchors replayed the proposal video, contrasting Samantha's tearful joy with the horrific truth that unfolded just hours later. David's gym business shuttered. His social media accounts were flooded with hate. But still, there was no sign of him. Back at the station, detectives combed through David's laptop. What they found was chilling. In the days leading up to the proposal, David had made a series of disturbing searches. How to kill someone without leaving evidence. Life insurance payout after marriage. Best state to disappear to avoid police. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditation. And then came the most damning file, a draft of a prenuptial agreement. Hidden in his documents was a contract. David had been preparing one that gave him access to Samantha's modest savings account and the small life insurance policy her school provided. It became clear, David didn't love Samantha. He loved control. And when Samantha started to slip from that control, he decided if he couldn't have her, no one would. But here's where the story takes its shocking turn. 2 weeks into the investigation, detectives received an email tip from one of Samantha's closest friends, Elena. She told police something no one else knew. Samantha had been keeping a secret digital journal. She had confided in Elena months earlier, saying she was afraid of David's temper, afraid of the way his charm could flip into rage in seconds. Elena had urged her to document everything, and Samantha had listened. Detectives gained access to the email account. And there, like a diary carved into stone, was Samantha's voice. Entry after entry described incidents of control. David grabbing her arm in public, David forbidding her from visiting her mother, David belittling her in front of his friends. She even attached photos, bruises on her wrist, makeup smeared over her cheek to hide the evidence. And then came the entry from the very night before her murder. "If anything happens to me, it was David." Those words would become the most powerful weapon against him. 3 weeks later, a tip came in. David Carter had been spotted in a small town in New Mexico, living under a fake name. He had cut his hair, grown a beard, and was working for cash at a construction site. But no disguise could erase who he was. The U.S. Marshals stormed the apartment he was renting. David tried to run, leaping from a second-story window. But within minutes, he was in handcuffs. The man who thought he could escape justice was finally caught. David's trial began in the spring of 2023. From the moment he walked into the courtroom, cameras flashed. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, his once carefully groomed appearance now disheveled, David looked nothing like the charming businessman who had captivated Samantha. His defense was simple. He claimed he blacked out after the proposal, that the stress of the evening caused him to lose control. His lawyers argued temporary insanity. But Samantha's journal told a different story. Prosecutors read entry after entry to the jury. They displayed photos of bruises, screenshots of texts where David demanded to know her every move. And finally, they presented Samantha's last words. "If anything happens to me, it was David." The courtroom went silent. Jurors shifted uncomfortably. Even seasoned reporters wiped away tears. This wasn't just evidence. This was Samantha herself, speaking from beyond the grave, ensuring David couldn't twist the narrative. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. David Carter was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The man who thought he could control Samantha forever was now stripped of everything. His freedom, his reputation, his power, and the woman everyone underestimated, she had the final word. In the weeks after the trial, Samantha's community came together. Her students planted a memorial garden at the school, calling it Miss Reyes Garden of Hope. Her mother, Maria, stood before a crowd at a vigil and said through tears, "My daughter was always underestimated. People thought she was fragile, but she was stronger than anyone knew. Even in death, she fought back. She left us the truth." Her story spread across social media, sparking conversations about hidden abuse, the importance of documentation, and the quiet strength of survivors. Samantha Reyes was an underdog her whole life, quiet, overlooked, controlled by a man who thought she would never fight back. But Samantha did fight back. Not with violence, not with anger, but with something far more enduring. The truth. Her digital journal, her quiet record of pain, became the weapon that brought her killer to justice. And in the end, the proposal that was supposed to silence her became the stage for her final act of defiance. This case is a haunting reminder. True strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it writes, and sometimes it leaves behind a message so clear, so undeniable, that even death cannot erase it. Samantha's voice was not silenced, and justice was served. The conviction of David Carter wasn't just another headline, it was a media storm. For weeks, networks dissected every angle. The proposal video played on repeat, side by side with mugshots of David in his prison jumpsuit. Podcasts analyzed the trial transcripts. Talk shows debated how someone so outwardly successful could harbor such darkness. True crime bloggers compared the case to classic stories of charm masking control. But beyond the sensationalism, there was a deeper question asked again and again. Asterisk, how many Samanthas are out there? How many women smile for the... This tragic story reminds us that behind closed doors, the truth can be far darker than what we see on the surface. Justice may have been served here, but so many cases remain unsolved, untold, and waiting to be uncovered. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chilling true crime case. Your support helps us bring more stories of mystery, betrayal, and justice to light. Until next time, stay safe and always look closer.